Well, hello everybody, Jeff here from the Learn Portrait Drawing channel, and this is part 2 of our Superman portrait series. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, go ahead and look in the description below. I'll put a link to it, and maybe I'll put a link to it somewhere up here. But this video, we're going to take what we left off with and we are going to finish this drawing. So we're going to speed it up, but we're going to talk through everything, my thought process, maybe tell some stories, and the whole reason why I drew this portrait in the first place. So before we get to that part of the video, I just want to say, as always, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following me, for leaving me your comments, and for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. That way you know when I have new videos coming out, which is pretty much every few days. So, alright, man, I'm talking too much. Let's just get on with this video. Let's watch how we finish this portrait right here. Alright, here we go, picking it back up where we left off in part 1. So, since part 1 we already kind of laid out the proportions and everything, and in fact if you haven't seen part 1 I'll have a link to it in the description below. But what we're doing now is we're actually starting to go to the realism phase. So what I'm doing here is blending the charcoal. So that thing you see in my hand, it's not a pencil. It's just rolled up piece of newspaper. And all I'm doing is I'm spreading the charcoal that's already on the paper. It's kind of a fun thing to do. If you've never worked with charcoal, this is actually one of the cooler things, because you'll see it getting darker as I'm shading over, but I'm not putting any charcoal on this. It's just taking what's already on the paper and just sort of pushing it into the paper, smoothing it out a little bit. So this is doing two things. It's smoothing it, and it's also distributing the charcoal. Like you can see there how it got real dark, but I can use it here to kind of branch out. And by pressing lighter, right here I'm pressing lighter, but I'm like carrying that charcoal out down towards the cheekbone. And it's creating that really neat light and shadow plane change right here. So I'm just going through the entire drawing and I'm trying to blend from dark to light. So here it's a little darker, under here by the lip it's darker. So I'm starting with the dark areas and I'll blend out towards where it gets lighter. See that? Like right here, just all in the chin. Trying to smooth it out a little bit. Notice I haven't touched the left cheek yet. That still has been left untouched. I'm just doing the dark areas first and blending over into the lighter areas. And see, now I can just lightly add a little tone there. Because this whole side of the face, it's all in shadow. It's turned away from the light. So that's why it's okay to shade all these things. Like even the whites of the eyes, notice I'm shading that in. The only thing I'm not really shading is this right side of the face. I want to leave that as white as possible to create the most contrast. Underneath here, let's just do this part of the shadow. And you can see the neck has still got a lot of pencil lines where I shaded it in part 1. It's not smooth yet. So we'll have to smooth out that neck as well, just like we did with the face. So now that we kind of smoothed it out, you can see I got my little stick out so my hand doesn't smear all over the drawing. But we're going to now use our pencil to really start adding that next layer on top of this. So what I'm going through is we're just going to work on the eye here, and I'm kind of now, it's sort of like, you know, you lay down a layer of charcoal and then when you blend it like you saw me doing a moment ago, it like pushes it back down. It kind of dulls it a little bit. Now that's kind of dull and blended, this pencil is going to help bring a lot of the details. So by making the eyes a little darker, and working on these eyelashes and these things. Watch how real the eye is going to start looking. This is where we're going to transition from sort of a cartoony looking drawing to a realistic portrait. Again, watch part 1 if you want to see how we got all the proportions down. I'm not really going to talk about, you know, drawing the eyes or drawing the features, because we already did that in part 1. This is all about taking what we have, pushing it to that next level, adding these finer details. This is one of my favorite parts. I'm so happy with how this turned out. I mentioned it in part 1, but this was for my father, so it meant a lot to me to not only give him a good drawing, something that I was happy with, but something that he liked, and he loves Christopher Reeve as Superman. So here we are, just shrinking the eye up just a little bit more. Part 1 we saw I had the eye a little bit larger, but now we're just kind of just ever so slightly shrinking it a little bit, adding the white right below the eye here for this eyelid. And it's going to give him more of that gaze look, that sort of intense stare. You know, the wider the eye is, the more surprised you look, right? If your eye's wide open, his eye's more, he's got this like intense stare. So see, I'm trying to make the eye just a little bit slimmer here. And just like that, I think we locked in this eye. I'm really glad with how that turned out. Now we're kind of jumping over to the other eye. What I'm using here is a smaller blending stump. It's still newspaper, but it's just a smaller newspaper that I use to get in like these small areas of the eye. Kind of just blend it, make it smoother. And now we're back to the pencil again. So I'm looking for these dark shapes, and I'm using the pencil to kind of bring those out. You know, right in the inner part of the eye, it's usually darker. That, you know, the inner cavity of the eye that kind of meets the nose. And the upper eyelid here is usually darker as well. So I'm trying to really get that in here. And by making this darker on top of this layer, it's going to make the eye stand out and look even more three-dimensional, more realistic. As you're watching this, if you have any questions about what I'm doing, please ask and I will answer them. Or if you just want to leave me a comment, let me know what you think of the drawing. You could leave me a comment, you can hit that thumbs up button, lets me know that you like it. Now when drawing the eyes, one of the things you got to keep in mind, look carefully and ask yourself, is there white underneath the pupil or the iris? And there is. So I always try and keep that in mind, that the dark of the eye doesn't always meet the bottom of the eyelid. There's usually a very, very fine little sliver of white that's there. And so we kept that in here because you could see that's true to the picture. He's got a little bit of white underneath there. It's all about exercising your powers of observation. The more you draw, the better you get at observing things. You start noticing little things that you didn't notice when you first began your portrait. You start noticing these little tiny details. You know, like look at the nose. Notice right underneath the nostril, there's a little sliver of white. So we're going to have to keep that in, like sort of right in this area. I'm just going to keep this little sliver of white right there. See that, how I didn't go all the way over? Little details. Those are things I never would have noticed when I first started out. But you become more observant and you train your eye to see little bit better every time. And that's something I'm noticing with every drawing I do. I'm just observing just a little bit better than I did the drawing before. So see, look how smooth his nose is looking now. It's looking like a smooth nose. It looks, you know, the light is hitting the top of it, so it's looking three-dimensional. We're going to darken right in here. This is sort of that transition. You could see on the picture right there by his cheek. It's a little bit darker. It's a little bit darker than, say, underneath his eye. So it's just noticing all these little differences. What's darker and what's lighter. Comparing one thing to the other. I can see right here on that side plane of the nose it's darker. So we're just using our blending stump, blending in all these dark areas. And again, going from dark to light. Starting here on the dark side and then blending it up towards the cheek, up towards the eye. And that creates a smoother transition. So if you're trying to work on your shading technique, try that out. Start with the dark and blend into the lighter areas. And it'll create a better transition. Using our pencil here to just kind of firm up this edge of the chin. And then we're just going to blend in this edge to soften it up. That's one thing that you keep in mind too, or that I keep in mind, is when I'm looking at edges, I ask myself, is it a hard edge or a soft edge? You know, is it something that has just a hard line, or is it very, you know, like a soft, smooth line? And if it's smooth, I just blend it out with my little blending stump, like the one that you see here. Here we're just using our eraser. Because this is all in light, I'm going to just erase as much as I can so it creates that really bright spot. It just really adds some cool contrast. That's what I really loved about this picture too, was that light and dark transition. Now notice I just completely erased the cheek, but there's a little tiny dark area. So I'm trying to put that in here, just ever so slightly. Just right in here. I'm not pressing too hard, but see, it's just enough. It's just enough to give that hint of a plane change right there on his jaw. So I'm darkening around the ear just to give myself a starting point here. Ears for me are still sort of difficult to do. I mean, I do an okay job at them, but they're not my favorite. So it's really important when I draw ears to really try and ask myself, what shape am I seeing? And just draw a shape. I'm not trying to draw an ear. I'm just like up in here, it's darker right in this area. It's like a little dark sliver. So I'm just trying to draw a dark sliver. And especially with the ear, since there's so many like valleys and ridges and stuff, I'll also look at what the light areas are. So I'll try, you know, if you're having trouble trying to see, you know, what's dark, just ask yourself, what's the lighter areas? You know, there's like this like ridge right here on the ear. So I'm just trying to draw around the light area. Drawing around the light area is another way of drawing the dark area. It's hard to, I know it doesn't really make sense, but Hopefully you get what I'm saying. So I'm trying to draw just the little indications of his chest and his clavicle here with my pencil. If you notice on the picture, there's a little bit darker areas, like right in here for the clavicle area. So I'm just lightly putting some charcoal in there. That way when we blend it, we can maybe keep some, it's not just flat, there'll be some definition to his chest and to his neck. So back up to the ear. Again, I mentioned this in most of my drawings, but I do jump all over the place. And that's only because as I'm drawing, I'll see something and I have to take care of it. So I was just working on the neck, and then I looked at something at the ear and thought, you know what, let me keep working on the ear. And then I might look at something and go, oh, let me work on the hair. See, like right up in here. Let me just work on this a little bit. But by doing that, by jumping back and forth, it just, you don't get locked in any one spot. You know, you have the freedom of working on the drawing as a whole. And I really like that. So here I'm just using my finger. I'm just blending in this soft charcoal for the hair, smoothing it out. Even in this area here, I'm smoothing this out. Even though it's white, I don't want it too dark where I'm smoothing it, but I don't want it just pure white either. So I just put a little bit of, you could still tell by looking at, you know, the hair that it's got reflective light. And now we'll just kind of define this outline a little bit better, where his hair goes. And then notice I'm kind of drawing like horizontally here, just to mimic the direction of the hair. See, horizontal lines. And I'm just going from the outer edges into the middle, because the middle is kind of where it meets at that highlight. So see, I'm just doing either edge, little lines there. And then here I'm going with the hairline. I'm just kind of flicking up with the hairline, darkening that part a little bit. But leaving just enough in there where you can tell that's a part of the hair, or a part in the hairline. By the way, I think this is the first celebrity I've drawn on this Learn Portrait Drawing channel. I think, pretty sure. Typically I don't do that because, one, I don't know what the whole licensing or rules are to showing this original picture. I assume this original picture came from the movie, but I'm not charging anything for this video, so I'm hoping that this video stays on YouTube and doesn't get flagged for anything. So that's kind of one reason why I don't usually draw celebrities, because I can't always show you the picture. But two, there's a lot more pressure when you draw somebody who's well known, because if you get anything wrong, it's very easy to know that you got it wrong. You know, if I just draw an average person, you don't know who that person is, so it may not seem like a bad, you know, drawing, or you may not be able to tell what I got wrong. But you try and draw a celebrity, you know, if I try to draw Leonardo DiCaprio and I get something wrong, you're going to know, you know, you're not going to have to be told something's wrong. You're going to know because you know what he looks like or what he should look like. So that's another thing why it could be hard to draw a well-known figure, or well-known character. So that's why I'm glad this turned out as well as it did, because I really do think we captured his likeness. I'm very happy with how this turned out. It's all freehand. It was all done in less than 3 hours of time. And because it was for my dad, it just meant that much more to me. And the fact that you're watching this means a lot to me too, because I do want a lot of people to see this. I want a lot of people to learn how it was drawn. Hopefully it helps you out. So you can see that ear's coming together nicely. We're leaving the light areas, the light shapes in there that I see, the darker shapes that I see. Drawing this hairline here. I'm being mindful of the distance between the eye, the eyebrow, and the hairline. That's one thing that really helps with getting a likeness, is, you know, paying attention to those things. Now, I'm also wondering at this stage, you know, if I should be adding a background or not. You know, I'm liking the way it's turning out, but, you know, I don't want to take away from the picture. I don't want to add a background that's going to be a distraction. So that's something I'm also keeping in mind right about now is, you know, now that the face is really starting to come together, how am I going to frame the face? Am I going to leave it like this with just a neutral sort of light background? Or do we want to be more true to the picture and draw sort of dark and lights in the background, kind of make it dynamic? So that's something I'm keeping in mind right about now. Here we are when we're doing the hair here. Again, I'm looking at the shape. I'm just trying to notice what's dark, what's light. It's not all dark. There's a little bit of lightness in between the hair and the forehead, which is what gives it this impression here that it's on top of the forehead. So right here I'm making it dark, but it's not quite as dark. See, I'm using my blending stump there to kind of smooth it out. And we're going to lighten some areas so it makes it look three-dimensional. So it looks like it's a curl of hair on the forehead and not just one big piece of hair. So what I'm trying to do is get this illusion of a shadow on the forehead by making the hair darker. Right in here, this is darker, so I'm really going over this part, the S part of the hair. Really going over that with the pencil, and then we'll smooth out right below it here. And by smoothing out right below it, it's going to make it a little bit lighter. And now when you look at it, it's starting to give you that illusion that the hair is just curled over the forehead, casting a shadow back on the forehead. It's one of the things I love about drawing is these optical illusions that it creates. Now again, back to this chest here. Notice I'm starting with the darker areas, and then I'm kind of going over into the lighter areas. Start here on the edge here where it's really dark, and then we're going to blend in to the neck. Here it's really dark, and we're going to blend down and in. Just creates a little better transition. Now let's see, it's really dark right now. We're going to work on that, but that's okay. What we're doing now is just trying to smooth it all together. I'm actually using the side of my blending stump here and doing these little circles. And that really starts smoothing things out. I mean, look how smooth the neck is already starting to look. But I'm maintaining these dark areas for the clavicle. Looking closely, I see it's a little darker under the chin. Darker obviously over here. You can see that in the picture. So let's just make sure that chin is separated from the neck. Harden this line here. And then right here with their eraser, we want to erase this, make this line really a strong transition. We really want to go from light, boom, to dark. And I'm really liking how that turned out. There's a little light line right here from the ear, kind of goes down a little bit. So I'm just very lightly using my blending stump, since that has charcoal on it. And see, we're just creating this very light line. Almost so light you can't see it. But it's just enough to add that extra touch of realism. Again, it's all about observation. And I observe that really tiny, tiny line. And it just gives it that extra little something. So I'm obviously making this dark. This is going to be the area that's blocking the most light underneath that chin. So we go really hard there. And then now working on the cape, it's, you know, I had to ask myself, how are you going to draw a red cape in black and white? Well, if you look at his outfit below the cape, it's dark, right? So I just know that when I'm drawing the cape, it's not going to be as dark as the rest of his suit is. But I know it's going to be darker than his chest. So again, I'm mentally comparing values. So see, I'm making this darker than his chest. And let's blend it so it actually, you could see it go darker. See how now it's darker than his neck in his chest area? We want to make that separation. Same thing on this side. So we're going to make this line a little bit darker here. There we go. And then again, we're going to make this darker than what we have his neck and his, yeah, I guess his neck in this area. And we're blending it all together. See, so now it's giving us the impression that it's his cape. And that it's wrapping around his neck. Now down here, this has to be darker than the cape. So we're going to use our compressed charcoal here, and we're going to go even darker. So if we had to rate the intensity of values, the chest would be, the neck would be 1, the cape would be 2, and this would be 3. Making sure each one is darker than the last. So see, no, it's not rocket science here. We're just using soft charcoal here, coloring it all in. And then I'm going to use my finger to start blending it in. And this soft charcoal blends nicely. But see, we want it darker than the cape. If we don't have it darker than the cape, then you won't know that there's a separation between the two. You won't know where the cape ends and the rest of his outfit starts. So see, I'm going to make it even a little bit darker. He's got this on the left side of his uniform. It's a little darker, so I have that, trying to keep that darkness in there. And And again, just using my finger to kind of blend it all in, smooth it out. And then we'll have to start adding some little details now. Like up in here it's dark. Right here where the neck meets the cape, it's darker. You could see that. So let's put that dark value in right there. And right here on the cape, there's like this little fold as I sharpen my pencil. So right here I'm seeing this little darkness here. So let's just add that in there. It's just these little details, but it's going to really add to the realism here. So see that? Just little tiny details. Gives it more three-dimensionality. Using our observation to note that right here is darker. Notice this part? This is darker, and then up here on the edge of the cape, it's lighter. So let's darken this area right here. Create more of a separation, more of a three-dimensional look to it. And then we're going to blend what we just put down, leaving the top shoulder of the cape lighter. So it looks like light is hitting that part of the cape, just like it's hitting that side of the neck and side of the face. Now we'll add a few more details on this side too. So we see it's darker right here where it kind of meets the neck and the chest. So we just add a little dark value here. It's a little darker along the edges, so we're just kind of darkening the edges and then smoothing it out. So we're almost done. We're getting to the point now where, you know, his face, we pretty much nailed his proportions correctly. And things are pretty smoothed out. We got a few more things to touch up on, but now we're thinking about the background. So let's experiment here. Let's see if we can, how it looks pretty close to the picture. So up here we know it's all dark. So I'm using some soft vine charcoal, the same charcoal we used in part 1 when we began this drawing. We're just using that and creating this here. Now I don't want to go too dark and I don't want the hair to blend into it, so I'm trying not to go as dark as the hair. But I'm just doing this as an experiment here. I just see I'm putting some in and then I'm erasing it. I want to see what it's going to look like. So there's some darkness back here, and then I just kind of rub it out with my finger. And see, by making this all darker back here, it's really contrasting the lightness of the side of his face. So I'm liking the way this background is working with the drawing. All I'm doing there, even though you can't really see, I'm just going up to the edge of the paper and just making sure it's all blended in with a solid color. And see, I'm trying to create a distinction. I don't want to lose that cape with the background. So I'm just trying to make sure that the background doesn't look like the cape doesn't look like the background. Trying to keep everything as separate as possible. Now let's work on this part, because up here it's also darker. Kind of comes up from where his eyebrow is. And I was a little worried right here. I got nervous shading this close to his face. I was afraid I was gonna like mess up the shape of his jaw or the shape of his cheekbone. But see, I'm just using my finger to kind of smooth it out. And I'm just asking myself, does this look okay? Do we want to keep this background in like this? I'm going darker right around the edges here because I still want this transition. Oop. See, I kind of made a little boo-boo there. So let's just use our blending stump to shade it back in. And then let's be a little bit more careful this time. So I'm just kind of shading up, right up on the edge. Again, this is all soft vine charcoal. It's very, very soft. Just if you touch it with a finger that doesn't have charcoal on it, you'll leave a big fingerprint. But see, this finger has charcoal on it, so it doesn't take as much away from it. But I'm liking how that background's looking. It does kind of give you the impression like he's standing in front of an American flag or something. So I'm trying to be careful right here. I don't want his cheekbone to stick out too far. And see, I'm just blending it all in, kind of darkening this area here with my finger. So one thing about soft charcoal is it's very easy to smear. That's why I typically don't use a lot of soft charcoal in my final drawing like this. Because, man, let me tell you, when I try to put this in a frame, whew, it was tough. Because one little touch and you put a big old fingerprint on it. It's the only problem I have with soft, like really soft charcoal. And I didn't have any fixative to kind of like keep it, you know, in place. So yeah, this was tough. So I'm just using my same first finger here because it already has a bunch of charcoal on it, so it doesn't smear as much. But now that I'm pretty happy with that background, we're just using our pencil here to kind of fill in the edge of the hairline, because I don't want it to look like, you know, shiny. I don't want it to shine too much. I want it to all be blended in here. So I'm just blending it all in. This here is my number 6 pencil, which I usually use number 6 here for like really dark hair. And then just kind of smooth it all in with the finger. Yeah, this is just about done, guys. If you've made it this far, hit that thumbs up button. Give yourself a pat on the back. And let me know, because I like knowing that I captured your attention. So some finer details here. This is the number 2 pencil here. Just bringing out little tiny details like little hairs in the eyelash. I'm just noticing anything that looks like it needs a little more blending, a little more, you know, final attention to detail. We're just doing that here. But as you can see, we are just about done. This is all the final stretch, the final touches. And overall, this drawing took less than 3 hours. So that's what I love about charcoal, and that's what I love about this channel, that hopefully I can teach you guys. You don't got to spend, 60, 70, 80 hours working on a drawing. You don't have to make it look like a photograph. You don't have to draw a grid out and get every single detail and put so much pressure on yourself. This is all freehand. This is all very, free-flowing drawing. Less than 3 hours. Hardly any measurements. And just having fun. Just looking for shapes. Trying to observe the smaller details, putting those details in, and you could see in just 3 hours you can have a really nice drawing, give to somebody as a gift like I did with this one, gave it to my dad. And if you follow me on Instagram, I think I have a picture of my dad with this picture. So yeah, this is it. This is what we ended up with. And feel free to follow me on Instagram, Learn Portrait Drawing, and check out these other videos on the screen. Let me know your comments, what you think of this drawing, what you thought of these videos, and I hope to be back more with future videos. So subscribe and stay tuned. Thanks for watching.